Know the difference with Annex Wealth Management? This topic is going to make you scratch your head. Is retirement bad for your brain? I spotted that headline, wanted to dig a little deeper to help us out. Deanne Phillips is here. Hey, Deanne.
Hi, Danny.
Author Mitch Anthony is the author of The New Retirementality.
Yeah, I love him. You know, I had the privilege of hearing him speak live several years ago, and he's actually given permission for us to use some of his concepts and materials for our workshops with Women in Wealth. He writes really great stuff.
Well, how about that? Well, in this book, he writes, quote, "There's a 30% reduction in short-term memory. Boredom is a real thing. The human species needs something productive to do. Otherwise, life feels aimless. A lot of retirees say they're busy. Busy? Doing what? Doing something 18 levels below your pay grade is not good for you," unquote. So, Dan, you know this guy. You've seen his stuff before. Do you see it sometimes with clients?
Yeah, we really do. You know, it's very human while we're working or when we're retired also to confuse activity with productivity, right? So while we might be, quote unquote, busy, we're not actually being productive. And, you know, we've always said you don't stop being an A-type personality in retirement, right? So challenge is important.
Axiom is the free weekly newsletter that we publish from Annex Wealth Management. And in a recent issue, we got at this, asking, if you are retired, how do you keep your brain active and challenged? We got a lot of feedback. In fact, too many to share all of them. Many people said they are active readers. Many do puzzles like Sudoku. A lot of people do Wordle. Deanna, I kind of want to go through some of the favorites that I got because they're really good. Here's one. Reading the same technical type articles as when I was working. I also like doing the same type of work, but as a hobby. Interesting.
That is interesting. You know, one of the things that I'm noting based on what you've been citing before is really good brain activity, but sedentary. And really, you know, to keep the brain active, there needs to be engagement with the body as well. I found it of interest where people were talking about grandchildren, because I think you'd be hard-pressed to say you're not going to be active physically if you're taking care of little grandchildren, right?
Oh, here's one. Listen to this. Owning racehorses, volunteer work, sitting on boards, rental properties, helping young grandkids with math homework that I don't understand,
yeah.
And then travel to new parts of the world. So you're right.
Have you tried to teach a child how they learn long division in the last couple decades? It's a real challenge.
Well, this is what they talk about, challenging yourself. It's that neuroplasticity that we need to challenge ourselves. Here's another one, working on mathematical things. Exercise. Here's another. Genealogy research, working out with a trainer, and then asking which muscles are being utilized. And that's from somebody that was over 70 years old.
I love that. And, you know, age should not be a factor in all this. You know, we do what we're comfortable doing movement-wise, but it is important to stay active. It does help. Studies show engaging the brain and longevity when we're physically and mentally active. So making sure that we do get out of that chair, or if we're chair-bound, we're doing chair exercises, right, to make sure that we get that connectivity. Different chemicals are released in the brain when you physically exercise as well. So again, I think it's equally important.
The question in Axiom was, if you're retired, how do you keep your brain active and challenged? We're just kind of going through a couple of these.
Here's another one, social interaction. And a lot of people mention this too, because we know that, and studies show us that Alzheimer's, you know, depression for sure, has a lot to do with isolation too. So being in an environment or having exposure to an environment where you're interacting with others who are doing an activity that you like, where you're doing it together, that also increases some of the right hormones and keeps you sharp too.
Here's one. Primarily by deliberating, learning new things across a breadth of topics and activities like landscaping, making espresso, workout routines, cooking, finance, and more. Start by reading, online learning, then try, fail, and try again.
Yeah, one person said trading commodities. Maybe that falls under that too. But I'll tell you what, I used to say that my idea of retirement is never having to watch CNBC ever again as long as I live, because I've had decades and decades and decades with it in front of my face. But no, really, you know, learning something new. So some people said a musical instrument, which, you know, is very mathematical, that also, again, incorporates the body and the mind.
Yeah, and you know, folks, you might stink at it in the beginning. planning, but that's okay. If you're not stimulated, any idea when does this start to happen in retirement if people aren't kind of keeping themselves stimulated? Is it not a first-year thing, is it?
Well, different people have different attention spans and time frames. So I guess I can answer it this way. I remember when my father retired, he was 65 years old, the average age. He was forcibly retired. He wouldn't have chosen to do it. His whole department got laid off. And he ended up going, okay, this is great. I can golf. I can play tennis. I can swim. That lasted for 3 months.
Yeah. Long enough to figure out that you need to do something else.
Exactly.
Researchers said they hope the findings will influence how retirees view their retirement activities from a more holistic perspective and pay attention to social engagement, active volunteering, participating in activities, fostering mental acuity. It's easier said than done.
It is. We all love the idea of retiring early, but remember, we're retiring to something, not from something, so we have to figure this out ahead of time.
Yep, and we think about this for you guys. We really, really do. We want to put a great plan together, but then we want to talk about life in retirement. That is really important. You can start. Head to our website, annexwealth.com. Click that Get Started button. Start the wealth metric process. Deanne Phillips, Director of Client Learning and Development, CFP, CDFA at Annex Wealth Management. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.